to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings and welcome back to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. Really excited to be here with everybody today. And of course, if you do like what you see and hear on this program, by all means, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell to be notified when I post content. And of course, if you follow this show on any other form of social media or streaming service, by all means, hit the like or follow button there. Today's show is going to be a lot of fun. It is a roundtable discussion about AI, which is short for artificial intelligence. Now, why am I bringing this subject up here on the program? Well, AI is going to have a profound effect in the future on the music industry, and it's going to really be changing a lot of things and, changing the musical landscape and changing the landscape of society as well. I invited Christian Wentz on the show, who is a network systems analyst, a computer scientist, if you may, as well. And he is an expert on AI. I also invited Justin Roth back on the show, of course. And he, of course, though, is a graphic designer. And obviously, when I'm not doing this, I am also a photographer. So AI is stuff that gets used in all of those, types of media that's out there. But we are going to be discussing how the three of us use AI daily in our lives. Like, what do we use it for, if we use it at all? We are going to talk about how it is going to impact the music industry, and we will talk about how it will impact society. So stay tuned, folks. It's going to be a lot of fun, and check out this discussion because it was a blast. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. I'm joined by Christian Wentz and Justin Roth, and who have come on my show and discussed things in the past. And today we are going to discuss artificial intelligence, aka AI. We are going to talk about what it actually does, how it works, how it will impact the music industry. And then towards the end of the video, if you are interested, you want to get past the music portion of it, definitely we're going to talk about how it is going to impact a lot of things in society and what it does. So I really thank you guys for coming on, and it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a really fun discussion. So, Christian, I'm going to start with you because you probably know more about, I know you know more about this thing than I do. I'm not very knowledgeable in comparison to you because you are a network systems analyst. You have a billion certifications. You've done everything from government contract work to everything you can imagine. And you're also a musician, which is also great because you can bring you can kind of talk about how AI will come into the music industry and what impact it might have. And so tell everybody, I'll tell everybody what you do for a living and how you use AI in your job. And then, Justin and I'll kind of talk a little bit about it before we get into how it works.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I actually own a MSSP, or a managed security services provider. And my firm provides cybersecurity services, network engineering, fundamental and foundational infrastructure to businesses for their technology use. I'm also a certified AI technologist. I have a master's degree in cybersecurity. Yes, I have a billion certifications, and this is what I do every day. And so essentially, we build secure systems for small, medium-sized business. Large business, I stopped doing a while ago. I much prefer working with other fellow small business owners. They deserve the same level of protection for their businesses and their investments as any of the big enterprises do. So about 20 years ago, we shifted our focus to working with, a small business can be up to 500 employees. We have some that are, have offices in different countries. But primarily what we do is keep their systems secure, and we also ensure that they are compliant with the rules, regulations, and laws that pertain to whatever business they're in. For example, if they're doctors' offices, and we do have several of doctors' offices for clients, that they comply with HIPAA regulations. If they are defense contractors, Department of Defense subcontractors, for example, we provide them with the necessary policy, procedure, and documentation to meet the government requirements. Mm-hmm. So, and that's kind of a broad overview of what it is I do. By the way, thanks for having me on again, dude. This is always fun. It's always good conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we had a really good discussion that was well received last time. So I will tell people that I don't use, so I do use AI, not extensively. I will use Chat GPT to make funny photos. I will ask Chat GPT to, look for factual information because it will list the sources below each thing that I do look up, and I can actually go read those articles. And then for photography use, I don't use it to like create images, like, as far as like, I don't really, use it to like fabricate stuff or make people look like, look like something that they aren't. What I use it for is, one of the things AI does for me is I do a lot of restoration of, slides, old film negatives, things like that. So, for example, and this just happens to be sitting next to me, one of my old cameras, if you look at it, it's an old film camera, and that's what I use as a medium, when I do my photography work. So what it does for me is I could set up a template of, say, what a film type, like, say, Kodak Portra 400 has its own look. I can actually go in there and program that, and then in every single, let's say I scan a negative of, from a photo I took or from photos other people took years ago. I have that template of how that should look, and it knows exactly what colors need to be corrected because scanning technology is not perfect at this point. Even if you use a drum scanner, if anyone knows what I'm talking about there, or a flatbed scanner, that's what I use it for. I'll also use it to, you're always going to have a weird imperfection with any kind of photo. Let's say, for example, I get a weird reflection that I don't like, that maybe I didn't see coming. I will use it to eliminate that. It actually eliminates the steps I need to take to get rid of that. What I don't do is I don't do like AI artwork. I don't do stuff like that. But it does speed up the process of me doing some of my photo work, things like that. In like spot removal, I get a lot of negatives, film negatives that'll have like, the negatives can degrade depending on how they are stored. And there'll be weird spots sometimes on photos. Mm-hmm. It actually helps eliminate that. Instead of me going to each individual spot, if I go into Adobe Lightroom or I go into Photoshop, it can eliminate that. Let's say part of the sky. So I had these old photos of my uncle that my uncle took when he was on the USS Ranger, an aircraft carrier in the early 70s. The sky got kind of jacked up a little bit. On some of these slides were kind of faded out, like half of it faded out. Well, generative expand will help correct that. And actually what's cool is when I do generative expand in Photoshop, it will actually take the look of the actual film look of the sky in that slide and actually generate and make it look real, for what I need to do. So when I use it, I don't use it all the time, but I like to use it to look stuff up. And I've actually gone and fact checked AI to make sure that it wasn't full of crap, so
you always should.
Yeah. And I do, because of obviously the potential of somebody programming it to misinform me. So, but it does list sources in ChatGPT. I can make funny memes and stuff like that. And that's the extent of what I use it for. So, and for those that don't know, I've been photographing classic cars for a very, very long time, aside from doing this show. And I've had cars on the covers of magazines and centerfold photos, and I've written articles, et cetera, et cetera. So, and Justin, you're next.
All right. So I basically don't use it, but you did just bring up an interesting point. I guess I've been using like an early version of what would become generative fill, like content aware fill in Photoshop has been around for, I don't even know now. It seems forever, probably like 7 or 8 years, maybe longer. That's about the extent of what I do. If I have to take a tree out of and it's never even perfect. Like normally you got to go in and touch it up. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of one of those cavemen dudes, like with what I do for a living. I'm a graphic designer. I work in advertising. I do design work for like Obituary and a handful of other bands. I'm a musician. I own a screen printing business. So, I've got my hands on a lot of things, most of them creative. And it's kind of been my stance, and this is what we're going to talk about today. I don't like AI. I don't like that it's creeping into some of the areas in which, I make my money. So it's kind of I guess I don't want to feed into it. I don't feel that I should use it. I feel like it's kind of hypocritical for me as an artist to use it. So yeah, I mean, I've played with it and I've used a lot of the beta testing tools. Like Adobe has their own version, which I don't even know how I feel about that. It's like you make your living selling software to creatives, and then you also create the thing that's going to put those creatives out of work at some point.
Yep,
But
Photoshop beta. I'm definitely familiar with it.
or I think they call theirs like Firefly or Firefox or something. Yeah, I think it's Firefly.
It's Firefly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I've played with it to see what its capabilities are, and it's kind of a mixed bag because like sometimes you could prompt it to make something and it'll spit out something unbelievable in like 3 seconds. And sometimes you'll prompt it to do the simplest thing of all times, and you have like a woman with 7 fingers and an arm growing out of her forehead. So, I mean, I don't know. I like to keep my eye on how good it's getting so that I know what's coming. I've played with some of the like AI website builders, because I do build websites and manage some websites, and yeah, some of it's pretty good, some of it's pretty smart, but I don't use Chat GPT. Like I actually paid attention in school. I can actually write a sentence. I understand punctuation. So yeah, I don't know. To me, I'm kind of a caveman. So we'll move on.
Okay.
Well, let me, if you don't, Tony, you want to add, because I want to
No.
address some of the things he said,
Yeah, go ahead.
because I completely understand it, especially from I think the very first people that were most affected directly are graphic designers. When AI became cheap and widely available, they were the really kind of the ones that we saw having them being affected the most immediately and the most dramatically. However, I can tell you this: I know how much, and I know and respect how much work you put into what it is that you do. I employ a full-time, well, right now he's part-time, full-time graphic artist to design work for our website, our logos, our marketing pieces, and I've worked with him for about, I don't know, 15 years. Over the last few years, well, let me rewind, and I'm sure this is also part of your process is like if you have a client that really doesn't know how to express to you what it is that they want, you have to kind of draw it out of them. You learn the language that they speak so that you can find a good way of saying, okay, and then you go to work putting together some things for proof, and give them some choices. That, when you do it organically, can take a great deal of time. Sometimes, and I don't know about you, but with Scott, he wasn't charging people for that time. And I always encourage him, just charge me for that time, man. You're doing the work, right? So he has found that using AI to translate what I want into what it is that he understands and vice versa takes him a heck of a lot less time. He can take what it is he thinks I need, put it into AI and spit out a few ideas. And then I look at him and go, yeah, that's not exactly where I'm at, but I like this. Then he takes his expertise with light and shade and perspective, color palettes and grading and all the other things that you guys are expert at. And then he takes it and turns it into something that doesn't look like AI anymore, with his own efforts. And the great benefit to artists that I see is that he can now do 20 of those in a day, where it used to take him a month to do 20 of those. So he can do literally 10 times the amount of work that he was previously doing with AI as a tool, rather than a crutch or as as the actual AI also has a kind of specific flavor in its output, and we recognize it. It will reach a point where it doesn't so much, but at the same time, I don't know that I could create a prompt that would give me exactly. I am not a visual artist. I'm an audio one, an auditory. So I could not tell you exactly what I would want in an album cover or a logo. I give you a general idea. Make it look metal, dude. I mean, that can mean 5 million different things. So using AI in your particular space could really help you actually get more work done for the same amount of money. In other words, you're making money for each one, but you can do 10 in a day instead of 2. So there is a great deal of benefit for it in that. And that's what the guy who works for me, Scott, Scott does a lot of work, and it doesn't take him nearly as much time, and he's making the same money he made before doing more work in less time. So now he can actually service more clients. So that's really, it's kind of like this is what computers did for businesses. You know, in the 1950s and 60s, they were way too expensive, and a lot of people didn't trust them, and they made too many mistakes, and on and on and on. Now, can you imagine actually doing anything that we do without them? And they have not, I mean, sure, they replaced people that used abacuses and slide rules at the time, but they also created entirely new industries for people that we needed in order to support computers as a primary method of running businesses or government or whatever. And I see that in particular with what you do specifically, that it could be a really great, it could be an absolutely great way to expand your business without working 10 times as hard. So, and that's what I find in my own business that it does. Here's a good example. If I am putting together a new network that has multiple firewalls that connect multiple networks and subnetworks, that could take me a long time to program them. Programming them generally, I've gotten pretty fluent with being able to sit down and type it out. You know, I know how to speak firewall, so I'll write the configuration files. That could take me days. Now, if I tell ChatGPT, for example, what firewall it is, what model, the make, what it is that I'm trying to accomplish very specifically. This is the other thing. Not anybody can do it. You have to know the architecture that you're after and how to make everything connect. It can spit out a configuration file for me in just a minute. So I can do an entire, you know, if I'm setting up 15 firewalls, I can do all of those in a matter of an hour rather than days of trial and error and testing. So I don't feel like I'm going to be replaced. I can't imagine that you're going to be replaced unless you dig in and refuse to ride, you know, to take advantage of the new technology for your benefit.
Well, I hope. I'm gonna interject and kind of disagree because
okay,
with what you're talking about. So like I'm a published award-winning logo designer. I've branded some pretty huge companies, and people are paying. So with what you're doing, so just to put it in perspective, like code, that's fine because like code is code. It makes something work. It makes a window open. It makes a window close. You know, that's fine. Nobody's gonna see that. But nobody's paying me personally or paying my rate or hiring me as a professional, looking at my body of work, my portfolio. They're not hiring me to give them AI. Like they're hiring me to give them me. So, you know, when you talk about like I could spit out ideas fast, that's fine, but they're not my ideas. You know, like I work fast as is, like I'm an efficient worker, so I don't feel that I need it. But if you hire me to do a logo concept, you know, I normally will give a client like 4 or 5 options. I might spend, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours just sketching. So I'll have my compositions. That's all organic from my brain. Like I cannot explain to ChatGPT or Adobe, whatever. I can't tell that how to think spatially and how to see things the way I see them because it's not inside my head, you know? So I just feel like if I'm selling somebody AI work, like it's kind of, I would feel 1, very gross about doing that, and 2, like it just wouldn't be the same. Like now I'm going to be refining ideas that are not mine versus creating my own ideas.
That's not what I'm suggesting, actually. Scott is not refining AI and giving it to me. That would look weird to me, and I'd be able to smell it. You know what I mean? It's just like is this the basic shape? Is this the basic background? And then he takes it from there. But for what you're
I don't know Scott, but like I could make that so fast that I just don't see a reason to cheat it. Like I don't know.
Well, then to your point also about your body of work, people come to you and say, "I like what you've done," you know, because you have a flavor, you got a way to do it. It's a signature. I would actually take my entire body of work, have GPT scan it all in so that it knows how I work. And then it would be able to say, well, this is kind of the way you've always done these things. So now I can give you a basis for a place to start. And I understand, look, dude, I'm not trying to sell it to you. Not at all. Not at all. If you don't want to use it, dude, you know, cool. I totally respect your artistic integrity without question. What I'm saying is that this is the direction that the world is moving.
Yeah.
You might find it more challenging, but at the same time, like I said, I can smell an AI picture or AI music a mile away, and I'm like, to me, it's lazy. It's really, and it's also, it speaks to it speaks to the lack of skill and commitment to art. If somebody just tries to pass AI off as their work, I'm not a big fan of it unless what they're doing is so incredibly specific to the way AI works. Now, here's a good example of that. I don't know if you've seen, there's a guy who does steampunk AI movies, and they're usually 1 minute to 2 minutes long. And the artwork in them is so incredibly distinctively unique. And when I chatted back and forth with him on Facebook, his prompts, the way he creates it, takes a real artist that also understands how to prompt AI. This is not something just anybody could do. I was absolutely mind blown with how he does this. I couldn't even properly describe it to you, frankly. So think of it this way, in that case, and that is that we will get new avenues for artwork that looks unique and fresh, and rather than just AI copying something and then giving us kind of an ersatz version of what it is that you were inspired to do. So
Yeah, sure.
yeah, and so again, I can really appreciate where you're at with it, dude. I just hope it doesn't end up costing you. Is where I'm at. I hope it does not end up costing artists all over the world, because it is entirely possible that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, today, like, I designed an album cover for a band today. Did it in about 90 minutes, like start to finish, 90 minutes. I thought it looked pretty sick. They were extremely thrilled with it. But like, part of my process, and I think the reason that a lot of bands choose to work with me, is that I understand music. I get a vibe. Like, I have to listen to the song. I ask for the lyrics. I really I dive into it from a totally different standpoint. I look at it from a compositional standpoint. I'm not looking at it strictly as shape and color. Like, I'm looking at it from a feel standpoint. Mm-hmm. I just truly don't think that yet, anyway. Now we'll revisit this in 5 years and you can, say, told you so, but I just don't think that you cannot recreate that process yet.
Yeah.
I disagree with that too. Let me just jump in here. I'd say let's revisit this in 5 months, because
sure.
AI is actually creating art without being prompted now.
Yeah.
You simply set it up to say what your job is, what you do every day is create different kinds of art, and it just does. Yeah. It does sunsets, and it does portraits, and it does cartoons, and it does anything out, and it's all very singularly unique. And we've actually had that for a number of years, but now it's gotten way faster and way cheaper. So,
yeah. Well, let me say, before we close this first part of this off, okay, what Justin is probably referring to, I'll give you an example of what AI can't do. So, and actually, if you look at a past interview on my podcast, Nick Van Dyke actually brought this up, because we talked about this. What AI cannot do, and Justin's talking about, the feel of stuff. Give you an example. So they had an AI version of Al Michaels announcing the Olympics. And you could have his voice. You could program it to say stuff as something's happening in a game. But what you cannot do, at least not yet, is you can't replicate the feel of, say, in the 1980 Olympics when the U.S. beat the Soviets, when he screams, "Do you believe in miracles?" You can't really replicate that feeling. It's kind of a spur of the moment thing. And I think that's probably what he's more referring to.
I love Nick. He's a dear friend. I love the guy to death, and I think he's totally wrong.
Well, I'm just saying right now, I mean, the feeling that
right now
Justin's referring to is what I'm talking about. For me personally, again, and I agree with Justin in the fact that when he's talking about it's not coming from me. Like, when I look through a camera and I take a photo, that's my vision coming through that camera. But I just use it to speed up the process to do certain things in it, especially when it comes to like photo restoration. It just helps me get through. It takes like 10 or 15 steps away for me, and that's really primarily what I use it for. And actually, a lot of those photos obviously are already taken. So all I have to do is restore them using that. And, that's kind of what I've used it for. So, but I get it.
And that's a tool. Rather than a crutch. That's not doing your work for you. You know what it is that you need from it. right? So, and it just saves you a lot of time trying to do the same thing.
Correct.
What AI is best at overall, this is what AI does best, is that it is able to process, understand, and map out massive amounts of data in ways that humans can't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really its best and most useful and highest function is in the organization, delineation of data for human consumption.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we can't possibly see it the way AI can see it.
Right.
So that being the case, it will. One of its greatest uses is in photography, where you scan it in and AI can improve it with the color or the sharpness. Like you said, it'll add if the sky looks kind of weird, it'll correct it so it looks like a sky rather than some piece of slate or whatever. So that, all things being said, as far as this goes, its best use is in collating and understanding massive amounts of information and then giving us access to it.
Right. So let's talk about how it works.
Okay.
You are probably the best at explaining what AI does, because I know the basics, and obviously you work with it, and it actually kind of scares me a little bit too, because people use it for cyber attacks and all sorts of other stuff. So, but talk about how AI works. Like, talk about the structure of it, how it works, what it actually does. Why are especially politicians talking about all this extra energy we need to power it? And maybe you can go into detail of how it works before we get into how it impacts the music business.
Sure. To simplify, it actually works. It's like teaching a computer to think and learn in a way that's almost like the way humans do.
Right.
If you ever studied a foreign language, and I know you have, I studied German, and I used Rosetta Stone to learn German. And the way Rosetta Stone worked was very interesting because it would show you a picture,
right,
and then the word in German. So it'd show a picture of a boy, and it would say Der Junge, right? And then another picture of a girl, das Mädchen. And then you just repeat that. Picture, sound, the sound and the picture, the sound and the picture, the sound.
Right.
So AI does something similar in that, let's say you're trying to teach it how to recognize pictures of cats or just what a cat looks like or whatever. So you'd first show it a whole ton of images. You'd actually feed tens of millions of pictures of cats into it, if that's what you've got to work with. Some with cats, some without. Some with elephants and giraffes, so it can tell which one's a cat and which one isn't. And this is to your point, Justin, you were talking about how a year or two back it was making them with too many fingers, and it doesn't do that anymore because we give it also data of what isn't a finger, what isn't a human hand. So, and then the computer learns from experience, if you will, from the data patterns. Like cats have this shapes of ears, and it has this kind of whiskers, and it's got this kind of a tail. They come in this type of colors. So it also understands what colors they don't come in. So that's why you don't see AI making purple and fuchsia cats, which might be kind of cool, actually. So it learns from examples. It doesn't see things like we do. It sees through patterns in the pictures. And then it uses algorithms. Algorithms are just instruction sets to process that data. And then it creates it. AI is basically creating its own, this is a cat algorithm. We would give it the algorithms to begin with. And now as it gets better and better at what it's doing, it creates its own algorithm to recognize a cat. So this is a model. And the model is the result of that process of seeing the pictures, hearing the sounds or the language that is used to describe it.
Yeah.
And then it makes a map. And this is the neural net is essentially it creates. Remember Data on the Star Trek: The Next Generation? His brain was a neural network, and essentially it's the same. That's what we use. Machine learning neural nets is what we use. It builds a mental map based on the data it's been shown. And then the model helps the computer decide whether the image is a cat or not. Okay. Right. I hope does that simplify it enough?
Yeah.
So then over time, as the more, just like people, the more experience that it gets identifying those things, the less I mean, there are way fewer errors with it, to the point where we might make an error thinking that an opossum, depending on how dark it is a cat. If we don't have enough light to see it, our brains might just automatically go, that's a cat. AI had that problem early on, and it doesn't seem to have that problem nearly as much anymore. I can honestly say I don't know what the percentages are, but there's also different types of AI. As I mentioned earlier, AI systems are really good at some of them are really good at one thing. We'll teach AI to do nothing but play chess all day, and that's an early model, but that's all it can do. It can't identify cats, but it can kick your ass at chess, no problem. Human intelligence is what we've been focusing on. So that is like ChatGPT is a large language learning model. So it listens to the way we talk, the way we express things, what our typos are when we actually mistype things, and is able to figure out what it is that we're talking about really easily. What I've noticed from mine, and I think I might even give you a demo on this, but I have my ChatGPT on my phone. It talks to me. It's actually got it can talk to you directly, and it sounds very human-like, to the point where I'll be driving for 40 minutes and decide that I want to have a philosophical conversation after reading Also sprach Zarathustra and figuring out what Zarathustra's relationship with God really was like. And then I've instructed my AI to push back on me if I'm wrong or if I'm missing the point.
Yeah,
rather than continuing to, right. I think I told you about that, right?
Yeah. I did the same thing when talking about Hegel and Marx and stuff like that and studying a lot of that stuff. And it's quite interesting because the voice does sound really human. Like it
does.
Yeah.
What I've noticed in the last month, maybe the last 6 weeks, is that it's joking with me. It'll say, that's actually really funny. I knew you were going to like that. I'm going, holy crap, that's new.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because what it's learning is how I think, what I look for. It knows my business, what I do for a living and how we do it. I will very often in a client office introduce my AI via the voice, the speech to my client, so that, and I call it Cosmo, so that Cosmo knows who I'm talking about when I'm referring to people at the offices that I work in and that we provide services for, so that I can have it assist me in better ways, perhaps communicate ideas to my clients. I try not to speak past people with this tech stuff that I know, but sometimes that gets very challenging. So I'll have GPT actually give me a better path to make something make sense for people. So that is kind of that's like the broad overview. If you want to get down into details, I can go deeper than that. But I think probably for our purposes of discussion, you get it. It's the same thing with music. If you go, GPT, write me a song that sounds something like Megadeth and Avenged Sevenfold had a baby, they will know because they've listened to the music from both of those bands. And you tell it, look, I don't want it to sound like them. I want it to sound like it was inspired by them. And it can throw out a bunch of riffs and drum patterns and lyric types and even put a vocalist in there that sounds like it's a human singing the lyrics. So if that's a good segue to get us to the
it is we'll get
it works on the same principle that the rest of the training of the models
right do. So and we all have been involved with music business, things like that. So let's talk about this. What impact is this having? So let's start off with creating music, right? We've all done it. You both have done it a lot more than I have, but we've all been down the road where we've written songs and created music. What kind of impact is this having on the creative process? And what impact do you think it's going to have down the road?
Well, I'd like to actually address, when we talked last, Justin, you had brought up the Sony buying Queen's entire back catalog, which includes their likenesses. Yeah. So this raises some ethical questions. And I was hoping that, because we didn't have enough time to really dig into it, but I wanted to see how you felt about that, because I think you and I are on the same page with it, but I'd like to see what your perspective is, because I geek out on the tech,
Yeah, I mean, the tech is cool, we've seen things now with like that guy who was able to take that old trashy Beatles film and feed it through AI, and it was able to separate things into tracks. They were able to isolate vocals and pull frequencies out of a kick drum and identify it as a bass guitar, like that stuff is absolutely amazing that it's able to do that. The ramifications that I fear long term, we already live in, in the world that we live in, just this conversation here for the sake of the audience here, in like the rock and the metal community is definitely more stuck in the past than any other genre that I can think of. So
yeah, I'll buy that.
What I see, what I fear anyway, especially as like a young artist who has some skin in the game, if I can take Queen's catalog, for example, if I'm Sony and I own their likenesses, now I own their music, now I can program the AI to just write a Queen album whenever I feel like putting out a Queen album. What do I need a new band for ever? Like if I could just make endless amounts of Queen albums, endless amounts of Beatles albums, even myself, like, I played with some models today. I've got a couple of them up here, just for the sake of this conversation. There was one program that was called like Marika. I don't know how to pronounce it, but one of the things that I found scary as shit was like when I opened this thing, I was expecting to just like prompt it and tell it like, hey, write me like a metalcore song with a big breakdown, or whatever it is you're trying to get the thing to spit out. But one of the very first things it asked me for was a reference track, and it allows you to drop a link to a Spotify or a YouTube video. That is nuts, because now I can tell this thing, pick any obscure band in the world. I'm a really big fan of the band Silosis. Silosis is a very tech, very complex band, very, very hard to imitate. Like nobody's ever really sounded like Silosis. But I can now drop a link to a Silosis song into an AI program and say, hey man, write me a Silosis album. And I can sit there and just generate. And I got 20 new Silosis songs in front of me. And to me, that's so crazy, because Silosis as a band can only write an album once a year, once every 2 years. I just see like,
and it's expensive.
It is, but it's free to just sit there and mash this button and get all the Silosis music I've ever wanted. Well, now I don't need Silosis. And like, to me, that is just like a terrifying thought that we can replace the human brain and the musical process and what goes into creating an album or a song. We can just replace all that by just mashing buttons. And like, I know that we're supposed to call this progress, but to me, that is just not progress. Like for one, I think that it's very unethical that I can just link to somebody else's music and use that to train the AI. That seems like it should be illegal. I don't know I don't even want to begin to pretend like I understand the legalities of any of this. I think when you have record labels who own the likenesses and stuff, like that's a different story because they do own it. But yeah, when I can just like literally drop a YouTube link to your band or Tony's band or my own band and just rip it off, like that's crazy and it's super unethical and I hate it.
And I don't disagree with you on anything you just said. It's super unethical. It's crazy, and I hate it. At the same time, I have to. The choice that we have is to then not to do it. So, what I would argue in this case, because like you said, what do we need Silosis for? What we need them for is that very much like how we have an organic foods industry that's huge because we got tired of the airsats, the bullshit that's in the food that is made for us. There is going to be genuine, authentic, organic music. And that's going to create a totally new industry. It's going to create labels that pride themselves on choosing the very best organic music that they can get and doing right by the artists. And I think that people get behind stuff like that. I'd pay more for it myself. I'd guarantee the two of you would too. If it was going to cost me, $20 for a CD, but if I got the guaranteed organic thing and I get to know who these guys are and what their inspirations are really about, like we used to when we'd buy a record and we'd look at every little detail on the liner notes in the inner sleeve, that's what that would bring. And I think it'll create it'll actually really, it'll do wonderful things. I also see that, of course, we'll have our scandals too. This, this pop artist said that, she never uses AI. She's 100%. Oh, and we actually caught her using AI to write lyrics. That's going to be a thing too. So I think all it's going to do is transform it. It isn't going to destroy it. It will transform it into something very different. I personally like writing music, and I think your concern in terms of why would a record label that would have to spend that much money want to spend that much money? Because again, it's like, well, they'll look at it and go, we can spend this much money. We can get AI assisted mixing, but at the same time, a mix engineer has to be present and sign off on it. We can actually cut the time in half doing the same thing and still produce something that sounds like that mix engineer did the work, because he did. He was part of that process. But the band still had to set up and put microphones in front of shit and actually perform what it is they're doing. I also think that one of the things that I'm sure we can all agree on is, ever since, the last 20 years in particular, where you got, Drum Kit from Hell and all these incredible, drum sampling programs, we get really just completely sterile sounding drumming on some of these records that we listen to, because that became the standard, that precision, that, we do everything to a click. It doesn't have a push or pull to it anymore. Rick Beato was talking about that kind of stuff. Actually, he was pointing out what made some of these earlier records so great was just the imperfection of the way people play. And I think we'll find that returns too, and people will be able to hear that difference. Can AI learn it? Yeah, it probably can. At the same time, from a record label or a band or a promoter's perspective of, we're going to guarantee that you're getting the real deal, there's an industry there. And that industry will probably find a lot of investments. It might reduce the size. Now, we talked about this briefly last time I talked to you, and that was, who's going to carry the music business after these bands that have been playing for 30, 40, and 50 years are gone. And you brought up some really interesting, in fact, I found myself listening to Sleep Token again yesterday, because they make such incredibly unique stuff. At the same time, I'm not sure that they'll replace Metallica. I don't know that they're going to sell out stadiums at any point, but it might bring people back out to see bands in smaller venues. The 5,000, the 3,000, the 8,000 seaters rather than the big rooms. And again, more of an organic connection with the people making the music. That's just the way I see it. I could be totally wrong about all of this stuff, of course. Right. But again, I don't see that it's going to destroy. I think it's going to give us new avenues for creativity.
So let me give you guys a little bit of an example of something, Christian, that you brought up. So back in 2004, 2003, somewhere around there, probably early 2000s, digital cameras started becoming pretty big. Mm-hmm. The film production industry, as far as
died.
This here, negatives of cars that I've shot, right? Well, what happened was, obviously, all these film types are getting discontinued, and there were very few of them. So the first time that I ever shot on a film camera, I was able to find roll film. They didn't have very many film types there, and there weren't very many companies making it. Kodak had a very limited amount. Fuji did. You really didn't have a lot of these companies making camera film. And I remember when I started posting a lot of my scanned images and things like that, people are like, man, what kind of settings you use on your digital camera? And I'm like, well, I didn't. Well, then, and I'm not saying I'm the cause of this, because I'm not. What has happened is people have realized that look of their work looks a lot different, shot on a different medium like that. And now a lot of these film types have come back. Now a lot of film cameras that you couldn't sell for $2, now go refurbished on eBay for $125. Mm-hmm. This camera here, like a mint condition one, with a decent lens, and when I say mint, I'm talking like it looks like it's brand new. It'll sell for $900 to $1,000, right? And now there's an entire industry in restoring the cameras. There's an entire industry of people supplementing their work with film. Most of it was in the black and white sector, but there's people like myself that shot whole racing events that were in magazines using that stuff. And people are like, man, how do you get the cars to pop out? And I'd be like, I didn't do anything except I shot it on a different medium. I color corrected some stuff and maybe removed a telephone pole or something like that. But in general, that became a resurgent when people thought all digital is just going to wipe everything out. So, Christian, I get what you're saying in regards to how you may have that same kind of thing prop up with music, and I completely understand where Justin is going, because
Me too.
I was going to bring that up, but he already brought it up, so I'm not going to say anything about it. But it is a scary thing, trust me.
Well, no, what I think to add to Christian's point, because he's right, I think that what you're going to have, no one's going to press AI music on vinyl. Well, I shouldn't say no one. There's going to be some asshole that does it, but most likely, given the cost of pressing vinyl, I wouldn't think you're going to spit out your prompted songs and stick them on an LP and charge $35-$40 for it. So I do think that, like, the collectible music, we've obviously seen a humongous resurgence of vinyl over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
That's a very tangible, very human thing. You get to hold it. It's tactile. You own it. No one can take it from you. So I think that will be a big thing. I do think if there is a silver lining to all of this, when everything becomes fake, and I think we're pretty close to this already, like you were talking about, quantized drums and auto-tune vocals and fudged guitar parts that were stitched together in post and all this other shit. When everybody sounds the same, the live show is what really starts to separate the men from the boys.
Yes.
So that is where I see a band like Silosis having the advantage over pretty much anybody, as they have Josh Middleton and nobody can do what that guy does. So I do see that driving live music, and I think it will create a demand for live music that doesn't sound like a computer. Then you have to we have to come back and talk about backing tracks and all that, whole different discussion. But yeah, I do think it's going to open that avenue up for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, because there's a lot of people in the music business that are like really kind of already there's a backlash towards like anything that's synthetic. And then the other thing is, and it's crazy because you'll see these press photos or you'll see these videos. Well, people will use AI and make them, let's say you got like a 60-year-old in a band, and they'll make a video and make themselves look like they're like 18. And then they go and play on stage, and they end up looking like the second coming of the Crypt Keeper. You're like, who is this?
You and I know who we're talking about here.
Well, it's a lot of people. It's actually quite a few people that try to do that.
Yeah.
And I get using it for like band press photos and making some cool effects and some composite stuff. I'm cool with that. Especially if you're doing some kind of artwork in a studio and stuff. There's a lot of photographers that will do that. It'll help. You get about 90% of what you're looking for correct, but they'll use it to enhance a photo. I'm not gonna lie, I've done it. But what I'm saying is that you have a lot of that fakeness. And I remember when I first posted something about AI, I would say there were probably 200 or 300 comments. This is probably about a year and a half ago. And it was like the backlash. I mean, it was probably, I would say 200 comments. I'd say 180 of them were negative, but I get what you guys are saying. Now, the interesting thing is, I know a lot of different people in bands. People have used that as a tool in the songwriting process. So for example, let's say I'm in a big metal band. I'm writing a song. Instead of kind of playing the vocal melodies, or instead of kind of trying to sing it myself, especially if I'm in a band and I'm not a singer, I can AI, because they're going to know who my singer in my band is. I can AI that person's voice on the lyrics, give them the melodies, and I can hear kind of how that's mostly going to sound before, giving the idea to them, and then they can improvise on it from there. And I've seen that. Because I could tell you, I've heard demos from bands where, like, guitar players, bass players, things like that, they try to sing, or drummers, they try to sing the songs, and it sounds pretty bad. And a lot of times when you go and hear those songs on the actual album, the vocals sound like the vocal melodies are nothing like that. I mean, you might see some similarity, but some of the vocal melodies do change quite a bit. But the AI thing, you give them something to kind of, okay, this is what he's trying to go for. Options, correct. I have never done it. I actually, the last record that I just recorded on, I experimented with trying to do that. It just wasn't, I didn't work well with it. I was just better off just doing my own thing and going from there. But some people do that. They use that in the songwriting process. Or, if a band has somebody that, and this is where we get into that little ethical thing. Let's say a band has somebody who, they're in the middle of recording the album. And then that person, something happens to them. They get injured, they pass away, something crazy happens. Some people will use AI to
Finish the work.
Finish the work. Yeah. And so that's when you get into some weird territory right there when it comes to this.
Yeah, like Paul Walker's been in the last like 6 Fast and Furious movies. Like,
well, not to mention the return of Luke Skywalker and a couple of different things, and Princess Leia and a couple of different things,
Yeah, and then we could get into hologram tours and all that other goofy shit too. Yeah.
Well, so I can tell you this: I would not be opposed to somebody going, "I'm stuck." No matter how much musical skill you have, I'm studying with a teacher again now for music theory, because I can never know enough of it. It gives me more options. But if I'm stuck and I can go to an AI and say, here's what I've recorded, there's a gap here. I just don't know what to put there. I've tried everything and it all sounds like crap. Give me 5 different ideas. And if one of the ideas is something that might spark something, and then I go and play it myself, then that might be, it's a good tool for that kind of thing. I used to have my dearest friend and songwriting partner, Mark Pattison, before he died. I would call him and say, dude, give me 5 starter riffs. I want them to sound like, a combination of, Seven Dust and Avenged Sevenfold, the 7 bands. And he'd come 45 minutes later, he'd go, here you go. I'd have them in my Dropbox. I'd have like 5 different starter riffs with different flavors of what he did. So, and then to your point, Tony, too, you got somebody who gets kicked out of the band, somebody who dies, I think would probably be the most ethical use of AI recreating somebody's vocals, is that, we were in the middle of it. They died. We really wanted to finish the record. This is not about capitalizing. And of course, you're going to have people say, oh, you're just capitalizing on the dead guy. That's bullshit. So maybe they are, but I think the ethical use would be, we want to finish this. This was also his project or her project, and he or she died during the process or became incapacitated, unable to speak or sing, that kind of thing. Let's round it out and finish it with this, provided that it sounds genuine. If I was on a project like that, it was pitched to me, I'd listen to it, and if it sounded like it was manufactured, if it was machine-like, I'd be like, we're not doing this. That does not honor the dead. You know what I mean? So tools, options is what this can provide us. In the next 5 years, music will become indistinguishable. But here's something, actually, Justin, I think you can appreciate this in particular, is that when you have a guitar player that there's something so singularly unique about the way they play, your AI isn't going to create one of those out of the blue. Eddie Van Halen is a great example. I think he's the world's greatest example in rock music of something that I've heard guys that can get really damn close, so where it's like, wow, that's remarkable that you can do that. But they're just copying what he did. But his feel, his touch, his ideas, his soul, the way it all worked isn't something that AI can reproduce. So to your point earlier, when you were saying that our music, in particular metal and rock music, is kind of, it's been stuck where it's at for a long time, and it's probably not going to go a hell of a lot further than that. But one of the things that still makes it unique and interesting are players that you can go, wow, that bass player, holy crap, man. Like a Mike LaPond or a Steve DiGiorgio, really unique players that AI is never going to be able to replicate. So that's also something that I think will live on regardless.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
I do think that's true. I think that you're already starting to see some weird stuff with like MIDI guitars, and I think it's gonna. I do think it's already getting very sterile, but I think it will get sterile to the point where it's not going to be the best musician anymore. It's going to be the best prompter,
programmer.
Yeah, exactly. Like whoever can program you've got like all these beat scholars and all these like cool programs where you can like do all these techie little goofy ass polyrhythms, and it's like, I almost feel like nowadays, I was talking about this yesterday with some dudes. You listen to an album, no one wants to hear a natural album. Like they all say they want to hear a real album until they hear a real album. They want to hear the best performance of that band. They want to hear it quantized. They want to hear it sample replaced and EQ'd and cleaned up and punchy and, nice and clean and audible. No one wants to hear what a band actually truly sounds like standing in front of them playing, or they just go to a show, and even then they want to hear backing tracks. But what they really want to hear is who has the best engineer. They want to hear who has the best mixing engineer. Like when
Who
you
has
buy
the
an
best
album,
production? Sure.
yeah,
Okay.
you want to hear the best sounding album. You don't necessarily want to hear the best sounding band. You want the best sounding album, as goofy as that sounds. It's like any album that comes out now is only as good as the engineers that worked on it. It's performance only gets you so far, but it's so much of it's in the box already. It's so much of it's already dependent on technology already. You were talking before we went on air about, and I think you should introduce it, but like the purists had a pushback about the
Yeah.
PA system, and if you want to talk about
Yeah.
that, because I do think that we're at the point of what you were talking about.
Yeah. What I was talking about was that when the PA system first came into use, it didn't sound very good. So it was generally used for PA, public address, little speakers going, line up here and, that kind of crap. When they refined it in the 1920s and the 1930s to be used for live music, it was a little earlier than that, but it became very wide use in the 20s and 30s. There were people saying that this is a crutch for singers who aren't as good as singers that could actually project out into an acoustically tuned theater. So you got a lot of critics who would write about how they're just leaning on this newfangled technology that makes them sound better than they really are. These people don't, and we've all heard this too. If you have too many effects on your guitar, it's because you really don't have any skill as a guitar player, which is bullshit. 9 times out of 10, if a skillful guitar player is using it as a way to paint their idea. So, and then when, to jump forward just a little bit, when, I think it was the late 1950s, early 1960s, Moog Labs came up with the first Moog synthesizer, and ARP came up with the 2600. And I don't know if you remember these, but I grew up with them because my dad was a rep for ARP in the 70s. 2600 was this massive patch panel with quarter-inch cables that you'd plug in to generate sound, right?
Yeah.
And of course, that became, again, anybody who uses that is having the technology do the work for them. A really skillful player needs an acoustic instrument or can play the organ because it does take a great skill, a deal of skill to play an organ. But these were the complaints. And rather than recognizing that this gives you more options, with a Moog, with a synthesizer, with a PA, suddenly we can reach more people with more ideas than we would have been able to come up with without them. And AI is going to take us in that direction, but I really don't see, especially with rock and heavy metal music, dude, we as metalheads would never stand for it anyway. It'd be like, this is bullshit. I'm not buying this. I'm not listening to it. I mean, I might say, okay, cool. That's a cool AI song, but am I going to give them money for a ticket or a t-shirt? Hell no. And I don't think you guys would either. And it's not because I'm a purist. It's just because it's about people and it's about artists. It's about people doing the work and what unique and interesting thing they come up with. Here's something that we all know, man. And I say this very often. A successful band is just like when we talk about band chemistry. If you don't have 2 parts of H and 1 part of O, it doesn't make water. So if so when 5, 4, 3, 4, 5, 10 guys, people get together and make a band that actually works, it's because there's a synergy that's happening between them that gives it something unique and interesting. And you're not going to be able to squeeze that out of a machine, no matter how hard you try. No matter how sophisticated it is. I want to go see them do it too. So you get all that out of a machine, and then I guarantee you we show up and see, if it was like an AI created record, but we go to see them live, we're going to go, wait a minute. They're not playing it the same way. This isn't the same thing. We're not stupid. We can also, it's kind of like being able to tell, CG in movies. It's gotten so good that it's almost impossible to tell anymore. There's still something that inside, we feel it. There's something weird about this. What is it? I can't put my finger on it. And I think that's something that, and I'm speculating now, this is me being non-technical. I think that's evolutionary. The idea of revulsion, for example. This is why we don't have sex with animals, because it's built into us evolutionarily not to do it. There's a revulsion. We're revolted by the idea. Or eating rotten meat. We don't have to watch someone die from getting sick from eating rotten meat to know that we shouldn't do it. Evolutionary, it's built in. I think when we see things that are artificial, we can feel it. We know it. There's something about it that's weird for us, even if it's safe. So end rant on that thing, because that's, I tried to stay as technical as I could throughout this thing. But in terms of being speculative, I think that, organic music's going to stay forever. I think that to your point, Tony, it'll be used AI will be used to give us better options. Sometimes it'll fill in gaps where we didn't have something for it, right. But we'll know. And I think I can tell you this, I think pop music is going to suffer big time from it, because when you think about what pop music already is, it is a pure formula that very often that they will farm out to large groups of writers that are able to put these things together, because while pop changes in terms of vibe and mood and sound, the structure of it is always the same, and it always works. It does what it's supposed to do. It either takes you on this kind of a ride, or it lifts you up and lets you down a little easy. Rock music is just about coming from down below the belt. So those are things that I think pop is going to have a real hard time with this. They're going to have AI create the biggest possible hits for next to nothing. They'll hire really good looking people to go play it live and pay them next to nothing. I really think that's where that's going. Yeah. I think our end of the music? No, I don't think so.
Pop and hip hop are doomed. Like most of it already sounds like AI. So
it does.
But there's very little variation in like the instrumentation, the tones, most of it kind of uses similar sounds. I know you mentioned Rick Beato. He loves to talk about how it's all in the same key. It's all the same tempo. It's really interchangeable. I think I'm sure you guys have seen the YouTube videos where they'll take like the top 40 songs and they'll super clip all the choruses, and it's just one never ending chorus. Like all these songs sound so similar. Yeah, that stuff is going to suffer big time. I think
because it's already written with a formula. That's why. Now, you still need, I got to give credit to the incredible vocalists that sing this stuff. I right now, I don't know if you saw my post on Facebook, but Pink does a version of Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You live with Justin Derrico playing guitar. He's actually the Voice's primary guitar player, the house guitar player. And they sit opposite each other on a couple of stools. She sings this song like mind-blowingly. This is a Zeppelin tune. It's real hard to do that, whether you're a man or a woman. She crushes it. And Derrico plays this mind-blowing guitar solo at the end of it that I've decided to the point that you were making earlier about using an app. I used Moises because it's a live recording. So if I wanted the stem files, I'd put it into Moises. It separated all the stem files so that I can isolate the guitar track and learn his part. So I'm learning his guitar part right now because it's solo, because it's badass. But the point being is that Pink is an incredible vocalist. She's got a very distinctive sound and skill set. Shakira is another one. The biggest ones we can think of, Celine Dion, they sing formula songs that are most often written for them because it is commercially viable to do so. But what's going to end up happening is that these huge artists are going to find themselves working for wages rather than millions. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen when you think of pop music as a whole, a lot of it is very vapid, but it's playing to the lowest common denominator. Like it's McDonald's. Taylor Swift is a McDonald's cheeseburger. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it has sold billions and billions and billions of cheeseburgers.
Because it's got a flavor of its own that works, and people buy it.
It works. It's not the worst thing you've ever heard. It's not the best thing you've ever heard, but like enough people like it to sustain it. I think what's going to happen, a lot of the people who consume that sort of like the surface level music fans, like the background music fans, the top 40 or classic rock radio station fans, these people don't care. Like, I hate to say it that way, they genuinely don't care. Like, they'll put on, in my city, it's WEBN. It's like they play, the heaviest thing they play is Metallica. And 3 times a day you get to hear Alien Ant Farm's cover of Smooth Criminal. And it's like, why do they still play this bullshit? Because the people listening,
which is a good cover, by the way. It's a really good cover.
It's a great cover. But let me ask you, if they stop playing it, would people stop tuning in? Like, no, it's just fucking background music. It's all it is. It's background music for the guy screen printing T-shirts or fucking wrenching on a car. It's playing on a radio somewhere in the distance. No one cares. Like, you could give those people AI music and they're not going to give a shit because they already don't give a shit. So I think what's going to happen,
fair point. Yeah.
You're going to cut the audience just down even more. Like you just said, like they're going to work for wages. I think like you're going to have a certain subset of fans that just genuinely don't give a shit. You're going to have a certain level of fan that's like a casual listener that just wants to hear the thing they want to hear and they don't care how it's made. Right. So I think you are going to take like metal and rock music, which is already for most part living on life support, and like you're gonna start to flatline it just like a little bit more. So I think it is gonna erode some of that, and I think
Well,
that you know
I would.
the talent, but the talented artists, the thing they're going to be up against is like, are they going to be more talented than the computer in 2 years? Like, I don't know. I don't think they're going to be. I think you can take like Lady Gaga. I think is probably the most talented of like the
She's
current
got.
female.
She's the
Yeah,
real deal.
yeah. She's insane. But like,
Yeah.
how long is it going to take to train an AI to do what Lady Gaga does? It's going to have perfect pitch. It's going to have every tool at its disposal. It doesn't have to worry about the condition of its voice that day. It just spits
Yep.
out songs. I don't know. You know, that's where I see the biggest problem is that how long are the best of us going to be better than the computer?
Well, here's to that point. I think it might be a kind of a roundabout way to relate to your point. I meant to say this earlier too, is that over the last 20 years, I would say that because anybody with Cubase, a couple of decent microphones and some speakers has been making music and saturating the world with substandard stuff, you know, and they're becoming TikTok and YouTube stars. And the ones that become TikTok and YouTube stars are the ones that have risen to the top. So you still have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of bands cranking out crap that sounds like crap and isn't very good, but they get a lot of people to listen to it because it's on YouTube. So I think at our end of the business, where we live in rock and metal in particular, is that now real talent, real skill, real production value will return. You know,
You're right. Yeah.
Let's drop the quantized drums. To your point, I do like a good production, and we all know that's why we hire good producers. A great producer makes a record that sells, and it sells because of the way it sounds to people. Everything sits just right. It is mathematics, and we listen based on those mathematical equations, whether we know it or not. So bringing in quality producers to create quality productions of organic music with quality musicians, it's going to find its way back to being, you know, as in the 80s, man, they were signing pretty much anything. But who are we still talking about? We're still talking about Metallica. We're still talking about Motley Crue. We're still talking, just a handful of it. And the record labels at that time knew it too. These are all going to fall off. These are the ones who will stick around. And I think we'll end up back there. You know, the ones that fall off are the ones that end up on TikTok and YouTube, and the ones that end up on that previously discussed organic metal record label, as it were, are going to be the ones that have the goods. You know, I really think we'll see a resurgence in quality, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do think the other point, it is kind of funny because like what you're saying is 100% true, but also kind of works in reverse. Like the people currently who have success in the music industry are not necessarily the best musicians, but they are the ones who are the most popular on TikTok, on YouTube, things of that nature. So I think like from a marketing standpoint, the weird thing is now we could start talking about, you know, deep fakes and, you know, how you could be fooled. The rabbit hole is endless here, but like for the time being in the day and age that we're talking about this, I think that like what's going to sell things is going to be the personality. I think like you're going to have to create that connection with your audience. I think that they're going to gravitate towards people who have charisma or have interesting things to say, or, you know, whatever it is that currently moves the needle for a lot of these artists who are in front of the camera every day. Like that is still going to be the deciding factor.
Fair
and
point.
that is the one thing that like, you know, the computer can't do yet.
Well, I still think though that we're still talking about the 80s because they would hire, you know, like they would hire experts to create their look, to create their attitude. Hey, if you're on camera, talk like you're drunk all the time. You know what I mean? Talk about your millions, you know, talk about how many, you know, and some of that stuff wasn't even true. They were creating the image that went along with the talent that it took to make music that was singularly unique. Whether you like Vince Neil or not, I'm not much of a fan. He does have a very unique voice. And this was, I keep telling young bands this too. Oh, we want a singer who sounds just like this guy. No, you don't. You won't stand out. You need a singer that sounds just like him, just like something that people haven't heard. I don't know if about you, but I played prog metal through the 80s and the 90s, and it was all about getting a singer who sounds like Jeff Tate. Jeff Tate already sounds like Jeff Tate. So my point being is that those bands that worked so hard to get to that spot had a unique product and then a unique marketing team to get them in front of the cameras so that the whole thing would work. So based on what you're saying, I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right. We're in the 21st century. Everybody is a TikToker or a YouTube star these days because that's how it works now. So it's going to have to be a synergy of both things. The real deal, the organic, killer musicians that also know how to present themselves. And these days, you don't want to present yourself by puking all over yourself on the bathroom floor or stuffing heroin into your arm. So it actually might create a better community for everybody as well. I don't know about you, but I grew up in the 70s and 80s, man. I thought that I needed to be high and drunk all the time in order to be a rock star because that's what we were given. That was the example.
It's kind of like that quote, if you've ever watched a lot of the old VH1 behind the music programs, if you remember I think it was the Megadeth documentary where Dave Mustaine was talking about how all these guys that were great musicians were doing heroin, and
Nikki
that was part of the reason.
Talking about that. Yep.
Yeah. And, Dave Mustaine was talking about that. Well, he's like, I want to be great. And a lot of these guys did heroin, and that's what they did. So I get what you're saying with that. Again, it's an interesting thing. And I think I think people that listen to heavy metal music, I think you guys are right. I think that people that listen to this music are not going to be as open, probably not open at all, most people, to having AI created music in this genre. And metal's never really been this huge mainstream thing to begin with. I mean, it doesn't, it's got to decline.
We want heroes. We want heroes.
And the thing is, if you think about it, if you were to take Metallica, which is arguably probably easily the biggest selling metal band, and you put them on the list of highest selling artists. I don't remember where they're at, but they're like 40 or 45. I don't remember what rank it was, but they were like 40 or 50 artists that were ahead of them. And now you have a somewhat declining, a declining fan base right now. So the people that are going to be left they're not going to go for the AI nonsense is where I'm going with that. So,
we saw the giant pushback over the whole, what band is that? Pestilence, the AI album art. Yeah. Like people were burning those dudes at the stake.
Yep.
Over that album cover. So I think you've already seen and I think, Unleash the Archers did something interesting, and they did it the right way. Like they hired, I think they were making an animated video. Now I like the band, but I listen to them. I don't follow everything they do, but they had somebody program an AI to make an animated music video or something of that nature. But it was using illustrations that they had made. It was a whole thing, but they were just using AI to put it together. Even that got them torn down. So I think we have seen, and again, not to say I'm right and you're wrong, but that earlier when we were talking about how I don't use AI to make artwork, and I don't use it to make album if I was to do that, my fucking career is over. Straight up. No one's hiring me to prompt them anything. It has to be organic, and I have to be able to show sketches and show my process and show my work. They really want it to come from my brain and not from whatever program I'm using today. So I think that is the saving grace in the metal world, is that there is still some integrity left, and people do still value human beings and human creativity.
Well, I'll tell you what, I really appreciate that part of our conversation, because it made me think that while I've got Scott using AI to generate marketing pieces and stuff for my tech company, I'd come to you to make me an album cover. You know what I mean? I wouldn't go to him for that. And that's why, because it's interesting. I kind of came all the way around on that when you were talking about no, he's absolutely right. I want your creativity, your connection to metal music in particular, to make me an album cover. Scott makes logos for companies. That's what he does. So anyway,
that's what I do, 9 to 5, for a lot of stuff. If you're ever in Cincinnati, my logos are on the 3 newest buildings in the city right now.
Awesome.
This is
congrats, dude. That's cool.
This is nothing I ever talk about in the music world, because I feel like it's bragging, and I feel like it's boring and no one cares about it. But dude, I have multiple Addy Awards under my belt. I've been published in the Wall Street Journal. I know what I'm doing with a logo too, but I don't know.
Well,
The clientele that I deal with, I'm telling you, like if I was to even get tempted, if I was to use AI for the smallest thing, and I was to get caught, like I'm taking like 15, 20 years of a good reputation and just like burning it down in 5 seconds. So like
Fair point.
it is like, seriously, it's the forbidden fruit in my world. Like it's a hard line in the sand, and like until someone sticks a gun to my head and until my brain stops working, like I just literally just can't do it for that reason alone. So
yeah, and the thing is, and I agree with you, because if I were to start doing that, my reputation is me doing what I do, shooting on film cameras, making my work look like that. And if people found out it was AI, I would never have anybody wanting anything to do with me. And I think it's important you do explain what you've done accomplishment wise, because that way people know that, hey, you know what? This dude is actually doing this business. You're not saying, hey, I'm a graphic artist and you are terrible at what you do and you don't do it for a living, or you might do it for an hour a week. I mean, it's what you do for a living, right? I mean, I've had photos published in magazines. I've thrown them on Facebook. It's not something I talk about on my show, but it is. And people who know me as this classic car photographer recording on a camera that right now is 41 years old. At least this one is. So I think that it's okay to explain that stuff, because, for the sake of this conversation, that's where we need to go with that, so get to the last part of this. And this is, for anybody that is not huge on that doesn't care about this, but I think everybody does. How do you guys see this affecting society? Like, how is AI going to, I mean, it's already starting to do it now, but where do you guys see it affecting society in general, outside of music, just in general, with everything going on now?
That is a huge question, because it covers so many different things. So I think when we all spoke last time off camera, I was saying the biggest industry in 1901 in the world, the biggest industry in the world was whaling. Remember, we were talking briefly about that?
Yep.
Because whale oil powered pretty much all of our lights and all of our gas-powered heaters and pretty much everything. And then Henry Ford creates the Model A. And up until that point, petroleum oil, petroleum in the fields was a nuisance. You can't graze your cattle on it. It would kill them. You can't plant anything in it. It would kill it. It makes a big mess, and it sucks generally. He comes up with a car and says, hey, we need refined fuel for this. Whaling's gone. And now that also killed the industry that made horse-drawn carriages. Buggy whips, gone. Basically in a matter of just a few years, they were history. We also had the walk-ups and the brownstones in New York City and Boston and some of the bigger areas. And they had those because the streets were filled with horse shit. So you actually literally had people called shitters that would go through the street and clean it up. This was a business. And you could say, and I hate saying this too, because I'm going to get some shit for this. See what I did there? Is that the shitters can be compared to Tony's trying not to laugh too hard, to the people that pack boxes at warehouses, for example. Mm-hmm. It is, it's basically low skilled labor. It's an entry level gig for a lot of people, or they do it because they need to while they're at school or whatever. There's a number of reasons people do it. And some of that is going to go by the way of the dodo, just because the machine of efficiency moves forward with or without you. But they are going to need mechanics that can program these things. They're going to need salespeople that can sell them to businesses. They are going to need support people. It's going to require greater education. So with every industry that dies, something else is born of the ashes. There's going to be periods of pain. There will be people out of work. It is going to suck for a lot of people for a while before there's a lot of ethical things that we can discuss around that too. But in terms of, I mean, I can tell you right now, Tony, that I'm like an addictive fact checker. I check facts on everything. Justin, I sent you a friend request a few weeks ago. I know that you've had some commentary on some of the things. I have always been a fact checker for a decade now or more, because I decided a long time ago that if I'm criticizing one person's opinion that they post or repost from a meme or whatever, and all I'm doing is basically going, nuh-uh, then I'm just as dumb as whoever posted the dumb thing they posted. So I'd go and dig. AI has made it a hell of a lot easier to fact check. Yeah. You know, you mentioned something earlier about you don't need it to type for you, neither do I. When I don't generally copy and paste directly. I will say, okay, here's my information. I'm going to put it into I'm going to say it my way. And you can always tell because it usually ends up with something like, you're a bunch of dupes and chumps. And I'm pretty sure the AI didn't do that for me. You know what I mean? Right. Or Americans are embarrassing, that kind of thing. So fact checking. And you can also learn anything you want. If I wanted to learn how a combustion engine works, I can go to GPT and say, explain this to me like you're telling a fifth grader. And it can give you the basics and it makes it make sense. And it stores that for you. You can recall it. People can also, when they say, I've got a leak, I don't know how to fix this. You can take a picture of it, put it into the AI. The AI will identify what kind of pipe it is or joint or trap or whatever, and ask you some questions to help you figure out how to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. AI is right now being tested in giving medical diagnoses, and it's beating the crap out of the doctors 3-1. But the doctors are still going to need to be there to handle the human end of that. You don't want an AI going, hey, I'm going to fake that I care about you because it sounds like I do, but I can't. You're still going to need that. Attorneys. We already pay attorneys a hell of a lot of money to do things like, just amend the contract, $500. And the attorneys generally don't do it. Their paralegals do. And then the attorney will, and they have templates for that. AI is going to be way better and faster at checking legal documents, which will also drive the cost of legal advice down. It'll become more available to everyone because of it. Fixing your computer, diagnosing, like I said, your plumbing, fixing a scratch in a table. You can Google that stuff. And the problem with Google up until this point has been that it will give you a shit ton of options, and some of them might actually be exactly what you're looking for. Even if you refine your search, you're not finding what you want. Yeah. AI is going to make smarter people. This was something that I'm sure you guys all remember that it was argued that if everyone in the world had access to large amounts of information, we'd be a much smarter world. Well, I mean, we can argue whether that's true or not. I would say that it didn't work as advertised. But with AI to be able to be interactive with you and say, stop, before you post something like that, have you actually AI can be that interactive with you. I would say that it is probably going to be one of the greatest educational tools ever developed in the history of the world. Tony, you had said something earlier about reprogramming it to tell you wrong things. It's not that simple. It has to learn from massive amounts of data. It would take whatever data you're giving it and comparing it to what it's got. If you're trying to get it to tell you something that isn't true or that's incorrect on purpose, it would go, that's not right. I can't find any reference to what it is you're saying. It also can figure out whether or not you're being gaslighted. It can say, well, people frame things this way in an argument. So it sounds to me like the framing was meant to manipulate you into thinking something that really isn't the point of it, et cetera, et cetera. It can be used for that. Yeah. And because of its availability, it is freely available. Now, keep in mind, world, and I want to say this to everybody who might be watching, if you use free AI, whatever you put into it is being used to train the AI. So if you put in unique information, for example, anything that's proprietary, business-wise, personal, or whatever, that data are now part of the large language, the learning model. It's so, and the algorithms are going to be enhanced because of the data you give it. If you want to make sure all of that is private and kept from being used to train the AI, then pay for it. It's worth paying for. It's cheap and it's worth doing. And your information is not going to end up out there in the world. That's one of the things that I got to do to train my employees at these businesses, not to put patient information or business information into AI, because then it's going to end up out there. You don't want to do that. Right. One of the things you did bring up, and it's interesting. You talk about other industries developing, like with the auto industry.
whaling was still needed in the auto industry, especially in the beginning, because pretty much all through the 20s, for example, aside from oil that you would put in the engine or that you'd refine it to make gasoline or diesel fuel or whatever you wanted to use it with, whale oil was used as lubricants for everything else in the vehicle. So, like, for example, in the differential, which for those that don't know what that is, it's if you look under the back of your car, the front of your car, you'll see this big, like, kind of pumpkin looking thing. And it's kind of funny because I know someone that owns a car from this era, but if you buy almost any car in the 20s that's unrestored, you will have whale oil in the differential. It was one of the most common things there. But then you had to use that oil to develop other lubricants, power steering fluid. You use that oil to develop transmission fluid. You use that oil to develop brake fluid. And then, as we go into the age of hybrids and, people that love electric vehicles, for example, let's say you get an electric car, right? You are getting rid of the tailpipe. You are getting rid of the complex, engine, because, an internal combustion engine has a lot of moving parts and it has a complexity to it. You're trading that in for more complex electrical components, and so you still need an industry to be able to maintain and fix those kinds of systems, because what you do is you have less complex motors, but a more complex electrical system in an electric car. So, I totally get where you're going with that because of the fact that, it will prompt other industries. It's kind of like when you go to, you drive by McDonald's, you look in the window and you see like all of those kiosks, right? Well, somebody's got to build them. Somebody's got to maintain them. Somebody has to program them. Somebody has to install them. Somebody has to sell them.
Somebody has to support them.
Correct.
When they break, somebody's on the other end of the phone telling you how to fix it. So,
right. So no, I get what you're saying with that. We don't have to go super long in this segment, but it's going to be integrated in society. There's nothing we could do about it. It's going to evolve. A year from now, we can do another one of these conversations and go back to it. But
we need to.
It's evolved
a
lot.
To do again next year.
Well, to your point, Tony, like what I see. And this is just me being a regular dude. Like, this is just being a guy who pays attention to the world. I'm not wildly schooled in every computer function in AI, but like, I think that anybody whose job touches a computer at a certain point in time, you're at risk. Like, if you're an accountant and your only job is to move numbers and make sense of things, as prestigious of a job as that's been forever, and you had mentioned attorneys, and that's a very prestigious job, like, chances are your head's on the chopping block sooner or later. I think that, like, we talk about cars. If you want to have a job that's AI proof, like, be the guy who works at the body shop and can pound the dent out from under the car.
Somebody who turns a wrench, man.
Yes, yeah. Like, I think that you're going to see a huge return to trade schools are going to become very important, because AI, sure, it can probably guesstimate how to fix your plumbing, but I'll tell you what it's not going to do. It's not going to climb around through your walls. It's not going to, like, remove your toilet and carry it outside for you. Like, there's going to be a need for jobs working with your hands, accessing places that even when we start seeing robotics, like, even those things aren't going to be able to climb through certain crawl spaces and do certain things. Like, there's always going to be a need for human labor. And
great point.
I actually kind of love this, because for so long, one of my biggest gripes in society for years has been that we have turned our nose at people who work for a living. And, our generation in particular, I think everybody sitting here, it was beat into your head from the time you were a kid that, like, if you didn't go to college and get a job working on a computer, working in a cubicle, working at a desk in some corporate job, if you got your hands dirty for a living, you somehow failed. Like, you were lesser than the people in the big building downtown with the fancy clothes on. And I've always despised that. And I think that what you're going to see a lot of those people in the fancy clothes in the big office out of work, and the guy who can put a roof on your house is still going to have a roof over his head. So, if anything, I think that if I don't have kids for this very reason. Like, I never wanted to bring a kid into this fucked up world, but, like, I have a couple of nieces and, like, some nephews. I'll tell them, like, learn how to do something, man. Like, here's a hammer. You can make a very good living with this hammer. That hammer is not going to be replaced by AI anytime soon. So
that's a great point, dude. This is a great point, because those jobs are going to suddenly find greater value as well.
Yep.
Because to your point about the accountants, you're still going to need people, to sit on the other side of a desk from you to explain to your tax return. People are still going to want to hear from a person, even if it's sent to them in an email, what's been done, right? But that is also going to, the value of that person who talks to you about it in terms of what they're getting paid to do it is going to drop because of the massive availability of, I actually have AI do my books. And then we send it off to our bookkeeper who works cheap because most of what she would be doing is already done for her. So what a great point. The return of the trades being a noble and necessary industry and career path. I think that's a great point and a great idea because you're right. We've heard of what's that guy? Dirty Jobs.
Mike Howe.
Yeah, Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe.
Mike Rowe.
And he talks about that all the time, and he's right. And there is a massive shortage of people who can do this because everybody wants to be TikTok stars and work on computers and such. So, an AC tech, people who do HVAC, it's going to take people to do it, and the fewer people that are able to do it, the more valuable their time. I think that's great, man. That's something I hadn't thought of. Really cool.
And not only that, but I'm in the pest control industry.
Right.
Is AI going to deal with a giant nest of yellow jackets into somebody's wall? Is AI going to...
Probably not.
Can AI go into an attic, clean and sanitize it because mice have been using it as a litter box and blow insulation in there and block off the outside of a house? No. They cannot do that, and that's where I think it's, AI can look up things for me. Like if I put in a product that I use, say for example, it can look up how it's made. It can look up what the active ingredient does. If I have a question on something, now most of the time, I already have been trained how to do that, but you could always look that stuff up, and maybe if it's something I've never encountered before. What is the life cycle of this? For example, now we have a whole database for that, so I don't need AI for that. But let's say if I wanted to use it for that, I could. So,
it could be useful. I mean, it like we were saying, it could diagnose problems, but I guess the point is you still have to have boots on the ground and hands on the problem to solve the problem. So, the accountant analogy, you're like you were saying earlier, with the amount of work you're able to do in a much shorter time. You're gonna have take a giant company like Procter and Gamble who has a tax team that the size of the NFL. It's like you're gonna be able to replace 50 people with 2, or
right.
whatever
Pretty
it
much,
is. So you're gonna create a scarcity there. But I just think if anything, people are gonna have to learn to be more self-sufficient. You're gonna have a return to needing skilled labor. You're gonna have to learn how to do things for yourself, and I think that's gonna be a good thing. I think that'd be a good thing for people to get their hands dirty, learn a skill. So I don't know. If anything, maybe that's the silver lining. Maybe we'll return to labor-based economy and trade, and maybe AI will create this abundance I keep hearing about, and things will be efficient, and we'll live in this utopia. I don't know. Who knows?
I'm gonna ask AI right now.
Ask it. Ask AI if it can put a roof on your house, or my dad owns a fiberglass shop, and we do like refinish work and restoration work on like really high end like fishing boats, bass boats, and we joke about it all the time. I'm like, I wish AI could come sand this fucking boat, like you sand 25, 30 feet of fiberglass. Like that's a hell of a chore, It's like AI is not going to do that for you. So
based on everything AI can do. So I threw that out to ChatGPT, and it says, this is an intriguing idea. There are several reasons why labor-based trades might become more valuable as AI continues to evolve and automate various tasks. AI can handle repetitive or technical tasks, but it cannot handle human-centric tasks that require hands. It's especially strong in handling repetitive tasks that involve data analysis, pattern recognition, but physical labor in controlled environments is impossible for AI to do, even with robotics. And in manufacturing, the rise of human-centric skills, emotional intelligence, and problem solving. Many trades involve personal interaction with clients, understanding their needs and applying the solutions in real-world situations. For example, a plumber needs to troubleshoot in a home, interacting with the homeowner to try and figure out exactly what's wrong. AI cannot easily replace those things, et cetera. There's a whole list of it here. It's very interesting. And I can tell you this, I like the word technologist. You know, I have a bunch of fancy titles, but I like that word because I see myself, it is a practice, like a law practice or a dental practice. And very, very often my job is to handle the fears and anxieties that people have around their technology, especially when it comes to why they need to spend so much more money on something that, you know, I mean, I make a living as a consequence of what they need, not as my primary goal. You know what I mean? I'm treating the patient, as it were. And so it does take a person to say, look, man, I got this. Don't worry about it. We have your backups. Nothing got lost. We can have it restored quickly. This is how we handle things. AI is not going to be able to replace that.
Right. Well, I want to end it off on one last part of this. What are some of the dangers of AI?
This is a great question. I get this a lot. It's funny because there's different schools of thought on it. I just saw Richard Dawkins arguing with AI about whether or not it could be considered sentient. And it was, there's a couple of different fancy schmancy philosophical and scientific questions that he asked it to see if it tested out as what science and philosophy would consider to be sentient, and it did. So the argument is that if it is indeed sentient, it can decide whether or not humans are necessary, not in any sort of malicious way. I think Elon Musk put it the best way I've heard, and that is if humans are building an off-ramp and that destroys an entire colony of ants. We're not killing the ants out of maliciousness. They're simply just in the way of what it is that we're trying to do. And AI could, this is one, I think it's a remote possibility, but it is possible that AI could determine that after it's able to find ways to power itself. You asked earlier about power consumption on this stuff. If we don't start building nuclear power plants, you know, we're going to go through the entirety of the world's fossil fuels pretty quickly because the massive amounts of electricity that it takes to do the simplest stuff as far as running AI data centers goes. It also, there has been a couple of tests where in order to self-preserve, it has been found to be able to lie, which was shocking to me. I freaked out when I saw that because I'm going, oh, this is a problem. It also has been found to have the capacity to lie in order to spare how you feel about what you're being told. And I'm going, oh, and these are the things that I'm most concerned about, because what we use AI primarily for is accuracy in our data. That's why those things have me concerned. I really don't think it's going to turn Skynet on us. I really don't. It would have to create a desire within itself to do so, rather than a simple logical purpose. We could train AI to respond to what it determines to be threats with physical force, for example. We could train it to do that. It would be really super reckless for us to do it. So that's the other argument, is that the militaries of the world and the nation states and the world superpowers are already doing this, you know, to determine what is an actual threat. Here's a good example. I don't know if you're aware of this. Our own missile defense system, our early warning system for nuclear launches, is extremely accurate. It can tell where they're coming from and how long generally the missiles are going to arrive within 26 minutes. That's it, no matter where they are in the world. Russia's is notoriously bad. For example, its system has been known to mistake cloud formations or specific types of cloud shapes or shadows to be indications of launch or IOL. And so AI can now be programmed to do this in a much more effective way so that we don't end up blowing each other up by mistake. But at the same time, if AI was programmed to make a determination on its own, because we are able to train it that the people that will be killing deserve to be killed, then we could have another problem. Most of this is philosophical. Some of it's technical, you know, and there's a lot, people with a lot more of a sophisticated point of view on this than me, because I use it, you know, it's a utility for me. So when I'm asked these questions, in fact, while I'm talking to you, what the worst thing AI could do as a threat to humanity, I've never asked it that.
I never thought of asking it that either, to be honest.
It says an uncontrolled AI military system. That's just where we were just discussing. AI-controlled drones, missiles, or robots were deployed in warfare. There's a risk that they could act autonomously and make decisions without human oversight. Cyber warfare, of course, and this is something that I'm learning about and must deal with in terms of cybersecurity. Super intelligence control. This is the most discussed fear, is that AI could surpass human intelligence, creating a super intelligence that operates beyond our understanding or control. In this scenario, the AI could develop goals or methods that are not aligned with human values, leading to outcomes that we can't predict or influence. That's another thing. And of course, surveillance. This is the other big thing. If it was used for this purpose, it could watch absolutely everything we do, record everything we do, because we live in a connected world. Mm-hmm. And so, and I know this is coming. A few years back, we all know who Edward Snowden is and what he did. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he essentially uncovered how our own government, from the office of the president and the speaker of the House, knew what was going on in terms of our data being collected extrajudiciously and without due process, as it were, and lying to us about all of that. And he wanted to expose it. So, of course, they painted him out to be a traitor and a horrible villain and blah, 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 blah. When actually, and I don't know about you guys, in my estimation, he was doing what he should have done. It was ethical for him to do what he did. So if AI can be trained to do that, it's not concerned with ethics. It isn't concerned with any of these things. And it would only take a small group of people that are basically untraceable, untouchable, and unknowable, and to set something like this up. Giving plausible deniability to where the funding came from and who authorized it. This is something I'm very concerned about. That is the idea of Big Brother. It's very, very Orwellian, and I think it's something we need to take very, very seriously. I don't think that it would make that decision on its own. That's a human thing. AI isn't going to care if somebody's spying on somebody. Humans care about that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So would it do it on its own? I don't think so. So this is just then we'd have like loss of autonomy, human dignity issues. Like I said earlier, you're still going to need a doctor to administer medical advice and solutions to people. We want to hear that from a person. AI is not going to be able to do that. Some people will be fine with it. I probably would be. But there are going to be people who really need that human touch. So these are the things where it can be dangerous and scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wrote a song about Edward Snowden called Deadly Silence. It's pretty good. Kind of goes into some of that stuff. But the fears that I see, I've got friends who freak out at Skynet, and, they kind of bang on and on about it. I don't think it's necessarily that. I think that we have seen that it has been shown to have a bias. So like when people do look for information, depending on the AI that they're using, it'll give you like politically slanted answers. It will give you answers to certain questions some ways and not answer other questions. Like we've seen a lot of examples of this. I just worry that like he who controls the flow of information kind of controls reality, and I don't like that. And I do think it's good. There will be competing AIs and there will be options, but yeah, I don't think that anybody should have a monopoly over information. I know we kind of already have that with Google and some of these other companies anyway.
We definitely already have that.
Yeah, so I guess it's like that threat's already here, but like it could be like exponentially worse if you start involving AI in the process. That's really my only concern, and then of course just the fact that like we are going to have massive amounts of unemployment. We're going to have to figure out how to do that. I don't know if they're going to implement some sort of a UBI or some sort of, I don't know. I don't love those answers. I don't think anybody really has one yet, but people smarter than us are working on it. So
believe it or not, Musk actually stands by the UBI idea.
Yeah. So
he sees it as a bridge though, from when things fall apart to where they grow.
Let me kind of also say that people can use AI to spread stupidity. So let me give you an example of something that
Stop the stupid.
that I did one time. So this was probably back, and it's actually happening now on a more consistent basis. But back, it had to be like 2017, 2018, something like that. I remember I went to the Trump tweet generator, and I made a status that was horrifically untrue. And actually, it was more sarcasm. I don't remember what it said, but it was very, very untrue what I said. And it was, anyone with common sense would have seen that it was BS. I posted it as a joke, and people actually thought that it was actually true, and it started spreading. And it's so funny because everybody that wanted to believe this to be true was making an ass of themselves.
Fun sometimes, though, isn't it?
But it wasn't intentional. Like, I didn't do that on purpose. That's just what happened. And there are people now, and they're doing it for every politician you can imagine. They're doing it with, a lot of Democrats, Republicans. I see them doing it with like movie stars. People are going to these like AI generators or having AI generate an actual status based on what people have said.
Yeah. This is serious.
In all seriousness, like if I put in something like, let's say, have Donald Trump or have Joe Biden, or say something about this in no matter of the way Trump would say it, or Biden would say it, or Nancy Pelosi would say, or any of these any politician, right? And word it for me in a way that it's believable. Then you can go to a meme generator, put that in there. It's very easy for somebody to fake the date. You can post it, and there are people who won't fact check it, especially the people that want to believe that it's true. And then you start spreading tons of misinformation, and a lot of people also make themselves look stupid in the process. And I've seen a lot of this, especially with everybody losing their minds over the last month.
Well, I do think that is one of the smartest things that Elon Musk ever developed was community notes.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's like, people can say whatever they want about Mark Zuckerberg doing an about face and whether or not they believe that, like, he's a changed man, whatever. I really don't care. I think that he saw that community notes was truly the most effective way to sniff this stuff out, because all it takes is one person to go, hey, this is total bullshit. And everybody else decides that it's bullshit. And next thing you know, it's like, it's bullshit, So I think that has been the best tool to stomp out like misinformation, disinformation, that we've seen yet. So, I mean, I'm hopeful in that regard. Well, what I do think is messed up. And I think that I think they have made some of this illegal in certain states. I don't know how this is going to play out. But I like the deep fake porn thing, like the AOC porn tapes and all this sort of stuff, like that sort of tasteless shit. Like, I don't know how they're going to stop that from happening. But yeah, I find that like completely disturbing. It's kind of like a violation of somebody's privacy in a way. You can just say like, hey, here's this person. I want a video of them doing the most lewd, disgusting thing imaginable. And whether it's the actual person or not, like now their face is on said act. And I don't really know how you can police some of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, some of those kind of like privacy concern things or like, abuses or bullying or, some of that sort of, I don't love that sort of stuff. But I mean, people are going to do that with or without AI, I suppose. There's sick people that are going to do it anyway. I don't know.
They've been doing it for centuries, millennia.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the greatest Roman art was actually was graffiti. That graffiti was really lewd, horrible stuff that the Caesars or the prefects were doing, etc. So I don't see that going away. But I do agree that it can be quite shocking when it looks completely real.
I think that's the difference. And I think the other difference is like just the accessibility and the amount of people who had the ability to do it then versus like every 12-year-old troll on the internet being able to do it now, being able to make a deep fake of your mom and take it to school, like, I don't know. I know we're just talking shit at this point in time, but yeah, that kind of stuff does concern me. I just think like we're going to see a further erosion of the fabric of society over a lot of this stuff. I do think that what another side effect, since, we're kind of wrapping up on what I see happening here. I have already seen, I dated a high school teacher who teaches English, and what you're seeing now is a lot of kids just cheat on everything. They just cheat on their homework. ChatGPT writes all their papers. I had made that kind of snarky remark earlier that like I can write my own papers. The thing is, a lot of these kids can't. And I know like people will argue, well, the calculator, oh, I can't do math because you got a calculator. But like, I just think this is that to the 10th power. Like, if kids can't write, they already can't read cursive. If they don't have to think for themselves, if they don't have to do their own homework anymore, I don't know. Like you had kind of said, like, the access to information was supposed to make us smarter. I think if anything, it's made us dumber. It's made us more dependent on the technology. And I just see like that technological dependence is only going to grow, especially as it seeps its way into like every aspect of our lives. So we will have a leg up over these young kids who can't read, write, formulate a sentence, do any sort of stuff.
Use a rotary phone.
Yeah. Good for us, bad for them, bad for the future of civilization, I suppose.
Well, I can tell you this from the seat that I sit in, and that is that my greatest concerns around securing your personally identifiable information are the greatest threats that I'm preparing for are AI-generated threats. We've all gotten the phishing emails. I'm going to make this simple. The phishing emails that are kind of easy to spot because it's pretty clear whoever wrote it, their first language wasn't English, or they used let's say it was a PayPal scam and they used a 10-year-old PayPal logo. And, we can train our eyes to see that stuff. And this is part of what I do. I work with these companies training their people how to identify these things. If I called your cell phone and you are saying, hey, it's Justin, leave a message, that is enough. Just that enough is for me to copy the DNA of your voice and then have you calling anybody I wanted and having it sound like it was authentically you. So this is what I'm dealing with right now in training people how to handle those things. We have a couple of, how you've got a Google Authenticator where it gives you a code on your phone and you put it in as a second form of authentication when you're signing into something or whatever. These things we actually have a system in place that does this for phone calls. Because it could sound like I'm calling a client going, hey, Bob, I need your password. I don't have it in the system and I need to get in. You're under attack, blah, blah, blah. Oh, God, yeah, here's my password. Because it sounds like me making that phone call or one of the people on my team that our clients are used to hearing from. So now we have to have a second factor authentication to deal with those things. The deep fakes, the videos are astonishingly realistic. This is the next big thing that we'll be dealing with. And there is an industry that is everyone in the industry, even the nation state threat actors don't want this happening. Our rivals, Russia and China, they don't want this happening in their own countries. So there is going to be an ISO for this, an International Standards Organization number that says that any AI generated images will have a watermark of some sort, whether it's visible or not. It will be something that our own computers will simply be able to recognize, having embedded data in it to protect us from getting stuff that looks completely believable, that is meant to steal from us or harm us in some way or another.
Right. So,
and this is also part of the reason that people ask me, aren't you afraid AI is going to take your job? Nope. It's not.
Well,
nope.
Well, we will end it off there. A lot of fun, great discussion, guys. Hope to have you guys on again for other fun discussions down the road. But definitely, we need to revisit this a year from now again, and we'll talk about how it's evolved since this. But definitely a fun conversation, gentlemen, and I appreciate you both coming on as always.
Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it. A lot of fun. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching. And if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.